Hello and welcome to my Woolly PhD. My name is Liz Scuff and this is a weekly vlog about what I'm currently learning and making in my anthropology PhD all about wool. I'm a little poorly this week with a head cold, so bear with me while this makes a little less sense or is a little less coherent than usual. I did still want to share a video because there was something really cool I learnt about this week. If you're new to the channel, there is an intro video that kind of outlines the overview of the project. So check that out if you're like, what's going on here? Now, in last week's video, I said I'd talk about sensory hierarchies this week if I hadn't already. And so I looked back through the episodes and I did mention it briefly in episode 2, all about touch, but not in much detail. So it definitely deserves another video, which I'll do next week, hopefully. But this week a colleague sent me a link to an interview with two historians who have written an incredible book about wool and war. And it was so interesting. So that's today's topic. And I don't have much to say about it, mostly just to share, hey, go check out their work. It's not anthropology, but it's super interesting, super relevant as a cultural process kind of analysis. It's not the first work on wool and war. There's a bunch of different work and different angles that people look at. We look at sort of women's contribution in wartime, can be a lot around textile making, knitting, is a big one there, crochet more in France. They're really super interesting things. And then these ideas about people knitting in spy codes into knitted things, which I'm not entirely sure it actually happened. I've seen some debates about this. But then also about the banning of sending knitting patterns during wartime. So, I don't know, there's something about that makes me go, ooh, how interesting, like it's kind of something secret squirrel kind of thing. Anyway, some readings and watchings to recommend. So the book is called Fleeced, Unraveling the History of Wool and War. It's by Madelyn and Trish FitzSimons. And there is a shorter article which is open access. It's called The Fabric of War, Wool and Local Land Wars in a Global Context, by the same authors, Madelyn and Trish FitzSimons. But if you want to check out some videos on YouTube, if you search Madelyn and Trish FitzSimons, and I will put their names and the names of those books in the notes below, you'll get the best results. So there's the interview on, I'm going to sneeze. It's called Floss Tube number 19. That's not the name of it's something about textiles with Trisha Newen. Anyway, I will put the links down there, but there's also a 1-hour presentation where Madelyn is talking the National Gallery of Australia, I think, and also a shorter 19-minute presentation about the shorter article with the two authors. Super, super interesting. A couple of the things that I found particularly interesting about it was that the rise of synthetic fabric which started with rayon, actually was due to wool shortages during the war periods. And the way in which wool is I think the thing I found most interesting about this was just sort of realising how kind of interlinked so many different things were that I hadn't kind of understood yet. And so, of course, Britain was a massive coloniser. So here in Australia, this is a settler colonial state, colonised by the British. Mass sort of genocide and dispossession of Indigenous people is an ongoing problem here, similar in New South Wales. I don't really understand the situation in South Africa, but also a colonised country for a while, settler colonised, maybe still exploitative colonisation. I'm not really, again, I don't know the situation there. But wool was so important in war, not just for keeping soldiers warm, but for stopping blisters, because it wicks away moisture, and if people's feet are wet, they're more likely to get blisters. So wool was a big determining factor about who'd win and how many soldiers you could actually deploy, like a massive kind of bottleneck. And so Britain doesn't actually have a lot of land, and so in order to expand its war effort, it had to expand its sheep herds, and so did this in colonies that it had established. So Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. There was also they weren't colonies so much, but they were British you say, certainly influenced a lot or controlled by British capital. So I can't blow my nose. Can't believe I've just done this on the YouTube video. Anyway, couldn't be helped, and I don't edit. So there's also Rapa Nui, which is called Easter Island, or also the Sandwich Islands in Hawaii, were also used as places to raise sheep and dispossessed Indigenous populations there. And so the way in which wool is kind of really tied up in settler colonialism because of the demands for war. Like, I kind of understood, you know, sheep and settler colonialism are totally implicated or entangled, but I hadn't really understood the war connection so much. And so another part of it is around the way in which the demand for wool in war is driving industrialisation. So cotton was, I think, the first textile to be industrialised and machines made to kind of process it, moving away from hand processing. And then looking to try to do the same with wool, there was a real need for longer staple, so longer length fibres. And the authors kind of talk about chicken and egg. I'm not sure what was driving what, but we could probably say a bit of both. So the need for kind of growing and selectively breeding for longer stapled sheep is kind of what led to Australia being sort of a world leader in long staple superfine merino production to service wars. And also the ways in which Britain tried to ensure that wool sales from Australia wouldn't go to any of its kind of wartime enemies. Super, I don't know why it grabbed me so much. Super interesting. Also, this estimation that they shared in this in these interviews, that they needed, each soldier every year needed the wool of 26 sheep. There's like millions of soldiers in these wars across, like, you know, a couple hundred decades, not 100 decades, 100 years or so. It's really, really interesting, and it makes me wonder what the situation is currently today. I was certainly seeing that Australian Defence Forces use merino thermal layers, so there's, you know, still the use of wool in warfare. Anyway, it got me thinking a lot, but I don't have much more to say about it because I'm a bear of very little brain this last few days. Oh, there was something else really interesting in there too. I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically a textile that they're making from pulped up paper, and I think this might have been in Germany, and because it doesn't stand up to wash and wear very much. Anyway, so there was a lot of drive to innovate other fabrics because people couldn't get enough wool. Again, all to service wars. Anyway, I think that's the only kind of notes I took on this. Super interesting. I haven't read the book. If you read the book, let me know. It's not going to be on my reading list for the next 5 months, I think. But the interview's super, super interesting. So that's what I've been reading about this week, wool and war. The week has also been just lots of still getting ready to leave for field work. What are we now? 8 days to go. I'm really excited and really sad and really nervous. But this is not a blog about a personal blog so much, so I won't go there. What have I been making this week? I haven't had so much time, but you might have remembered, if you watched last week, I had that little small tragedy with my vest where I had knit the pattern wrong for about 7 rows and had to pull it back. So this was the one that I had knitted incorrectly, so I had to only pull it back to the sort of top mustard line here. So I'd pulled back sort of 7 rows here. So anyway, I've recovered those 7, and on my way to finishing this one, I think I've got about 10 or 15 more rows until I've got to pay attention to the instructions again and do something for neck shaping. I really wanted to get this done before I go. I had visions of myself getting on the plane in this. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. It's not going to happen. Anyway, so then I've got to decide, am I taking it with me or not? I think I might. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see how I go. I have to think on that. I will report back next week on my decision. The only other thing I've been working on is I dyed some yarn. So also from last week, I think I told you about how I dyed this vest, which was grey, and I dyed it green after getting my colours done and confirming that, yes, pale grey, it's not my colour. So I'm planning to knit on the plane. I've got 2 projects I've got to set up for the plane. I'm going to knit the Poppy Shop convertible balaclava. Check this out. I just feel like that could be a real thing in Iceland that could be useful. We'll see. And I had picked out these kind of pale pink things that I had just from my stash because I wanted to knit it from stash, and then went, yeah, pale colours don't really work for me. So anyway, I dyed them, and so I had wanted to dye them darker, could not find my brown dye. I thought I'll just add a little bit of brown to the red. I don't know anything about dyeing, but I thought could work. But I did resist adding a little bit of green to the red for the same effect. It might have worked, but I wasn't sure. Anyway, this was like a dusty rose, and I love this. It's very nice. Still a little bright, but it's maybe not as bright as it looks on the camera. And then this was a really pale pink with little flecks of speckledy stuff in it. And it doesn't look as orange as it looks on the screen, I think. So because I have to knit, I think it's worsted weight, so I've got to knit 2 of these and 1 of these all together. I think that'll come up nice enough. Then I will have myself a balaclava. I also did stop into my favourite Melbourne wool store, Sunspun, and I picked myself up some John Arwen sock wool, and I'm going to start some stripy socks on the plane in these 2 lovely colours. So that will be my plane projects. And that's all I've been making, not a lot this week. As I kind of wind down my making things, I do have some fingerless mittens that I'm halfway through that I wondered if I could take on the plane and finish off. I just don't know if I'm going to have a need for fingerless mittens in Iceland because I think I'm going to need my fingers covered. I don't know. I've got a big packing challenge because I really don't want to. I want to take as little as possible so I can bring back as much as possible. And field work for 4 months is not. It doesn't feel like the kind of thing you can do lightly or travel lightly, especially Iceland where you need lots of warm stuff. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I'm waffling now. Thanks for watching. Apologies for the slightly incoherent episode this week. I reckon next week could be a lot better. And yes, I will, unless something else exciting comes into my inbox, sensory hierarchies, I promise. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.